Okay, welcome everybody. Tonight we're taking a slight detour from our normal show, which is our monthly Meet Your Makers with a winemaker, a Paso winemaker. And I was happy to be able to talk to Mira Honeycutt about joining. Many of you might know her, she's pretty active in the group. and talk about highlighting this book, although it's not really Paso centric, it's still very meaningful in the Central Coast wine community. So I said, well, this is something worthwhile. We want to talk about that. Everybody loves the movie. I don't know anybody that doesn't love the movie. So I thought it would be an opportunity for us to get a deep dive into some of the things you learned about the movie itself, about the author of the book that became the movie, and I thought everybody might be interested in this. So, anyways, this is their book. You just recently released this, right, Mira?
Yes, it was released November 5th, so
Right. Okay.
weeks back.
So you can
National
get this on Amazon.
on
I,
Amazon.
I'm about halfway through. It's really compelling. And I think you'll enjoy the read. There's a lot of things you didn't know. If you like reading about the backgrounds of movies, it's pretty fascinating. I like to watch docs about the movie, how it was made and why they chose the actors, and this gives you a lot of that. So, um, anyways, I want to introduce uh, Mira and Kirk Honeycutt. Kirk you have a background, Kirk, in you were a wine critic, or no, a movie critic. I'm sorry, for Hollywood Reporter, right?
Yes, my background is film journalism, and
Right.
I was the chief film critic of the Hollywood Reporter. Actually, at the time this movie came out, which was 2004, 20 years ago, and I saw it the first time at the Toronto Film Festival in September. So I actually had the first look at it in a public screening, anybody, and was one of the first reviews online. So certainly it was online at the end before the end of the day. So it was online before the premiere, which was the following day. So
Okay.
yeah, I was a film critic.
Okay. Well, and then introduce Mira. I don't know a lot about Mira. I know you're a wine journalist and you're very active up in the Paso community.
Well,
And
I've been writing on wine, oh gosh, for a long time, and for like a couple of decades or so. And but I was writing initially a lot about what I called, the late '90s California lifestyle. So it was fashion, film, art, architecture, health, beauty, and of course some wine. And
right.
then I started traveling to Bordeaux, invited by friends, and that's how my wine writing really started. Is going to one of the second growth Bordeaux, do a story on them for an airline magazine. That's really how it kicked up. Then when I was invited to Chateau Margaux, and then I wrote about them. So really, I started with visiting Bordeaux wineries before I had visited any of the California. Of course, Napa. I've been to Napa a few times, and so Central Coast is really my beat now, since we live here in Paso Robles, and I have my monthly column in Paso Robles magazine, and I contribute to several of their sister publications along the Central Coast.
Okay. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. We'll talk about how you came to decide the topic about the movie and how you came to decide to write this book. Jason.
Thanks, Mike. And Mira and Kirk, thanks for joining us in this holiday special edition of Meet Your Wine Author. Uh, our first, maybe only. But we're excited to have you guys here. As Mike mentioned, I think it's a movie that probably everybody has seen and enjoyed. So I think this will be a very fun conversation. Uh, a lot of our usual good friends here on the call. Uh, as Mike mentioned, this will also go into YouTube for viewing later. Tonight's format will be a little bit different. I think we're just going to have kind of a roundtable type conversation and open it up to questions from the group after we get into it a little bit. And so I
Let me
think we'll
chime
have,
in. Let me chime in on that too.
yeah,
So everybody that's on here, if you got questions, put them in the chat, and then I'll call on you, and you can ask Mira and Kurt any question. Kind of keep it relevant to the time what we're talking about at the time, and then we'll just go through. I'm sure by the end we'll get into some things about the movie itself and the actors. So anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
No, all good, all good. Yeah, so it'll be a little bit more interactive than usual, and should be fun. So, you gave a little bit of the background, and I don't know if there's any other background that you want to share. Um, if so, let's do that. If not, let's talk about what inspired the idea of the book. But I'd like to know before we get into that, is there any other background that kind of led to what positioned you to the book?
Well, over the years since we've been married, he used to go to a lot of film festivals, when he was with the Hollywood Reporter, and I would go with him because I was also writing on film at that time for different publications and also for Hollywood Reporter. And then I would go to wine festivals and he would go with me. Of course, he wasn't doing any writing on wine, but so to him, to me, it was work. And to him, it was like, having fun and vacation. And people would go like, this is a great team. He takes you to film festivals and you take him to wine
Totally.
festivals.
That was my first thought when you said that, is what a great combination.
So exactly. That's what. So we said, well, it just so happens I got to go to wine festivals and he got to go to. So when I would think about it, we didn't know years ago that it would kind of build up into a book. It's everything just happens just organically. So I'll let you.
Well, explain the whole, because it was your idea. We were at
Aubin Clément.
we're out that. What is the name of the?
It's called Clendenin Lindquist Vintners now.
Yes, it's in the Santa Maria Valley.
The big
It's
warehouse.
in Biennacido Vineyard, and there was in July of 22 a big open house, and we were there, and it was crowded with people, just jammed, and Pinot Noir was definitely the belle of the ball. So.
And we're sitting out there, so many people, and just crowds of people, all members and all. The entire the warehouse is the size of a block, if you've been there, And then Biennacido Vineyards are right there, the hillside mountains, and I'm like, did anybody know years ago that Santa Barbara would come to this? I said, you know what? Did anybody know the movie would start this kind of an interest? And I said to myself, there's a book in it. Just like that.
Yeah, and see, Santa Barbara was kind of, it's hard to remember that 20 years ago, people didn't know anything more than maybe California wine, they think Napa.
Yeah, right.
Maybe Sonoma, maybe, because it's next door. But I don't think Santa Barbara was on anybody's radar. And this movie, it pretty much put it on everybody's radar. Everybody had to get their atlases out and figure out where this was. But it just did so much for that area. And then because of Pinot Noir is the central wine of the movie, although curiously they don't drink that much Pinot Noir in the movie. You may not notice it, but they really don't. But it is the one they talk about so much that became the go-to wine. So it had impact on Santa Barbara, but in the American wine industry, Pinot Noir was just elevated to second to Cabernet, and that was not its position when that movie premiered.
It's fascinating, and an element of the movie that I didn't think about. You think a lot about what the movie gets blamed for, but not a lot of what it gets credit for. I'm curious, Kirk, before we go any farther there, in the the film festival days, did you have a favorite film festival to attend?
No, I didn't, because we went to so many eclectic and film festivals. I mean, the granddaddy of them all is Cannes.
Cannes, yeah.
So I think that's your favorite.
I loved it. I mean,
and because remember, Cannes is unusual. It's not only the biggest film festival in the world; it's the biggest film market in the world. There's two entirely different things going on. You can see an esoteric movie from Estonia, or you can go downstairs and see a blood and guts movies from some cheap guy in Van Nuys knocking off, and they're in the same palais. It's called Palais, and that's about a million screening rooms in there. Some can seat about 5,000, some can seat about maybe 30. And you have this whole potpourri of cinema, and you have to wear a black tie to things. And you're in the Riviera in May, and that could be cold and it could be hot. it just feels weird to put on a black tie to go to a movie, but
And
you do that.
proper shoes.
Yeah. But anyway, Toronto was a
Yes.
potpourri, but it was mainly, it's pretty much a launching pad for American movies. I wish it has all these international movies. It'll have Indian movies, Sri Lankan movies, it'll have movies from all over, but the press is forced to focus on American films. So I was there to see Sideways because this was a big deal. Alexander Payne had just made About Schmidt, which came out maybe a couple years before, starring a movie star for the first time in his career, Jack Nicholson. It's a huge hit after two very successful, critically successful, not financially, comedies, low budget. Now he made a big movie, made a lot of money. He could call the shots, and this was his next movie. And for us, it was set in the region where we actually got married,
We
the
got
Santa
married
Barbara wine
in
region.
Los Alamos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then as you're traveling around, Mira, did you have a favorite wine stop?
Oh, you mean in Central Coast?
No, anywhere in the world.
But Burgundy, of course.
Burgundy. Well, okay, the motherland of Pinot.
Yeah, Burgundy, and I just loved Chateauneuf, Provence, that whole Rhone region, because after Cannes every year we would rent a car and drive up and go to one of those places, whether it's Bordeaux, Burgundy, Champagne, Loire, so all of that region. I love France. We go there a lot. We used to. We haven't been there, but I love Burgundy, and I just love Provence. That the Rhone region is just so beautiful.
Burgundy is a strange place where it's the most expensive bottles of wine in the world,
Yes.
and you got a bunch of farmers running it. I mean, it's not like Bordeaux where there's a British tradition and background to the place, and it feels almost British, even though the accents aren't.
And these major chateaus,
But here they're just guys in blue jeans sitting around, and it's the most down-home place that produces the most expensive wine in the world. I really wish it weren't so expensive, but the reason it's expensive is there's so little supply and such great demand. So it's a real dichotomy there. And we had an unusual experience, which we share in the book, where we were with Etienne de Montaille, and he got a phone call that said, well, he called us and said, do you want to go up on an airplane and look at Burgundy from the air? Because a buddy of his had just flown an airplane into
a small
Beaune.
four-seater.
So we got in this small four-seater and went flying over Burgundy. And now, once you do that, you understand the problem. There's a highway, there's wine, grapes up here, and then there's nothing. There's just this narrow 30-mile band running along the Côte d'Or, the Golden Slope translates better. And that's it. And the ones down towards the river aren't the best wines. They're okay. They're village wines. They're things like that. So it's the wines that are up the slope that have the Prestige and the Grand Cru or the Premier Cru. And you understand why it's so expensive, because there's so little and it cannot expand. Here in Paso Robles, we can expand a little bit. I hope we don't expand any more right now, but they can. There, you cannot expand. You can't plant another grape.
And you see from the air, patchwork of little tiny parcels of vineyards, like a quilt, patchwork of quilt. And those are the prized vineyards. The bottles go for thousands of dollars. And that's it. That quilt is just that it's not going to go any further. It's very exciting going there. But we have great vineyards here. We have great, all over California. And I still think Central Coast is like, God's gift. I think it's just so beautiful here. And certain parts of Central Coast, these little villages, the little towns, Avila, Pismo, Los Olivos, and they remind me of, I say, south of France, these little villages in Provence. Of course, they have a different charm. We have a different charm,
Los Olivos, when this movie was shot there, as you remember the famous scene in the cafe, had maybe 5 to 10 tasting rooms. Nowadays, it is a town devoted entirely to tasting rooms.
30 tasting rooms or something?
I'm sure it's more than 30, yeah.
But it's still maintained.
Let's circle back to that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mira.
Sorry?
No, I'm sorry. I think I cut you off, Mary. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just said that it's Los Olivos has still maintained its charm. It's just a little town.
Yeah.
Yeah. In spite of all these tasting rooms.
Well, so I want to circle back then to that earlier comment about, and I think a common misperception that, a lot of the talk about Sideways is the damage it did to Merlot, but maybe not enough credit is given to how it grew Santa Barbara as a wine region. And I personally haven't thought about that very much, but is it fair to attribute a lot of the growth to that movie?
I'll let Mira answer this, but I just want to say from a journalistic point of view, there was a phrase coined, and by whom is not known, but it might have been in the wine community more than the film community, the sideways effect. And the sideways effect talked about the impact on Pinot Noir and, regionally on the Santa Barbara wine region, but you can continue that.
Right. Well, we heard from several winemakers that Pinot Noir was just beginning to happen at that time. San Rita Hills appellation was not quite, it wasn't, there was no AVA at that time in 2004-05. And it was, we loved it. A lot of people that we knew loved it. A lot of sommeliers in LA, let's say, fine restaurants and all, they all knew good Pinot Noir. So it's not like suddenly it got discovered. But I think it got discovered by the masses because the film had a huge outreach.
Well, two important events, and both media driven, that created the phenomenon that is the Santa Barbara wine region. One, the movie sent a lot of people up there to the point that the restaurants were jammed, slammed. The hotels couldn't keep up. In fact, the Windmill Inn where this movie was shot changed its name to the Sideways Inn. And they were inundated. And frankly, some of the winemakers didn't care for it because people were drinking the wines, but they weren't necessarily buying the wines, but other people were, and it became this huge thing. But remember, something else that someone pointed out to us was about this time, about a year later, the Michael Jackson trial took place up there, where he was accused of molesting a young boy, although he was found not guilty. The media was there morning, noon, and night. And every day there'd be an off day from the court. Court would be in recess, and they had nothing better to do. So they went to the wine region. Suddenly, New Zealand and Australia and South Africa were reporting about wine things because they had nothing better to do. And this actually, this around the world, people were seeing that community on TV because there were so many media people staying there for months. So those two things happened back to back, 2004, 2005. So suddenly Frank Ostini, whose Hitching Post was almost the star of the movie, had 3,000 cases of wine in 2003 and didn't know how he was going to sell it. Next, 2 years later, he had 15,000 cases and was selling it like crazy. And he could have expanded, but he just, there's so much one guy can do because he's running 2 restaurants too. So he is like, well, Alexander Payne, the director of the movie, says this, and this is his famous line: "All I know is Frank Ostini made more money off this movie than I ever will."
Yes, and that's true.
But, I think it's important to point out that Pinot was not a random choice for making a movie. Let's pick a wine we want to. So you might want to just address how the author of the book that became the movie, it was the Pinot that he fell in love with. Is that am I saying that correctly?
Yes, Rex Pickett is the gentleman you're referring to. He wrote a novel that was unpublished called Sideways. It was about his experiences, not only discovering, well, he had discovered wine when he was at the lowest point of his life. He had made 2 films. He was a filmmaker. They had not done anything for his career. Nobody ever saw them. They had maybe made the investors money back, but that was about it. the wife he was working with, who was producing and starring in his films, decided that she'd had enough of the marriage because he was drinking rather heavily. And so she left for New York. And he was in a rent-controlled situation in Santa Monica. So he did have a house, and he had to take roommates in order to just pay his bills. But he happened to go to a wine store called Epicurus, I think it was, in Santa Monica. And he started discovering the world of wine. It's another way of drinking it, if you think about it. Maybe it's a little lighter beverage. And then when he played golf up at La Purísima Golf Course, he discovered that, oh, Santa Barbara has wine. So he went on the Fox and Canyon Trail, and he started discovering, Foxen and Fess Parker and all these other wine, and Au Bon Clément. And he decided to write a novel about this. And his great love was for Pinot Noir. This was his grape. He certainly
And
drank.
New World at that, it sounds like.
Sorry?
And New World Pinot in particular?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
Santa Barbara
yeah,
Pinots
yeah,
largely.
yeah.
I don't think his budget could afford Burgundies even in
Yeah,
those.
fair.
He may have tasted it Epicurus, you know.
Yeah. Oh, he
wine
tasted
shop.
them because
Yeah,
the guy, there was a British guy who kind of ran the store when the owner was off visiting his mistress. So to avenge the fact he was poorly paid, he opened a lot of bottles of very Pommard and some of those wines. So he was introduced to them, but it was his first real Pinot plunge, if you will, was at the Hitching Post, and where he ran into a lot of winemakers. I don't know if you've been to the Hitching Post, but winemakers hang out there, or they used to anyway, before it became such a celebrity place. And he met these guys, and he started drinking wine with them, and they were pointing out things about it. And he actually is a bit of a wine expert. I don't know why he doesn't write a book about wine, but he could. He really knows an awful lot about wine. And because of Sideways' success, he has traveled to South America. He's traveled to New Zealand, tasting all kinds of wines. And he certainly knows his stuff. And it's always been strange to me that Miles, his character, based on himself as alter ego, didn't become a wine critic or a wine writer, because that would be the obvious thing. He couldn't catch traction as a novelist, but maybe he could get traction as a wine writer.
Yeah, think about it.
But anyway, he wrote a novel that ended up with Alexander Payne on his to read list. And he eventually did read it on an airplane flight from London to LAX, and got off the plane. And before the days of cell phones, got on the payphone and called his agent and said, buy this book. It's my next movie.
Also in there, he was a golfer. He started going up with a friend.
Yes.
Right? A buddy.
A buddy, yeah.
They played golf, and they went and tasted wine.
Yes.
It's all part of
his life.
It's not an imagination thing. It's part of his life, and that's what they did. Now it's got, obviously they turned it into a story.
Well, the fictional idea is that the guy, the friend, the buddy who knows nothing about wine but loves to play golf, is going to get married, but he wants to mess around on his. He wants a bachelor party that lasts all week before he gets married, and so that's the fictional element, and puts a ticking clock in it. So you have Sunday through Friday, or was it Saturday? You have a whole 7-day turn in the movie where it tells you which day you're at, which is a nice way of segmenting the movie and to show you audience where you are now. But that's the fiction part. But the reality was they were a couple of guys who were, he was a gaffer on his movie. So his buddy was a film guy, but not a filmmaker. He was one of the crew, and he had been on his crew for one of his movies. So the two of them would kick back and just would go to Santa Barbara and go to the Foxen Trail and drink a lot of wine. And they got an idea for a movie.
I'll also say something else I learned. This is a generational problem. I didn't know Sideways meant inebriated. My generation is more like shit-faced, their thing. But I didn't know that Sideways, that's what that meant.
A lot of people didn't.
It's in the novel. It's not in the movie.
Yeah.
Right. I read, when I was reading your book, I learned that because I didn't really, why did they call the move Sideways? it didn't really dawn on me. I just watched the movie and I loved it. It didn't
And
matter what
and
the
it's next,
title was.
Yeah, well, you go
yeah.
sideways.
Now I
Next
get it.
was
Now I
more-
look at the artwork for it and they laying down on the ground. I get it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the artwork is so iconic, and believe it or not, the studio didn't like it, but Alexander Payne liked it, and Alexander Payne, after about Schmidt, could call the shots. So he said, "No, that's the artwork," and now it's on everything. They're, you know, as you know, they're Searchlight Pictures is now doing a big jump up and down about their 20th anniversary.
They're doing major
film.
merchandising
And
on
they're-
T-shirts
And Frank Ostini's got a bottle of wine that has sideways on it now, and it's all that artwork, which is
Yeah.
the bottle being sideways.
yeah.
I also want to say, for context, Alexander Payne went on to make The Descendants, which is another one of my favorite movies. Excellent script, excellent on it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you know that one, that's a George Clooney
Yes.
about Hawaii, and they own some land there, and
Right.
there's like 4 or 5 subplots in there, but
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, George Clooney wanted to be in Sideways, and he met with Alexander. I don't know how he got the script, but that script was all over town. People knew about it. Every actor wanted to be in that movie, and George Clooney wanted to be in it. And Alexander Payne said to him, "George, the character that Thomas Hayden Church ends up playing is Jack is a guy who can't get arrested in Hollywood. He can't get a job acting. You don't fit that bit. That's just a joke within a joke, and I don't want that joke in my movie. That's silly.
Right.
That George Clooney can't get a job."
Yeah.
So, and he always says, "It's nothing against George Clooney. And by the way, I made my next movie with him." So it was just, it didn't fit the part. And also CAA, the agency that represented Clooney, also wanted Brad Pitt, and they thought, well, what if Brad Pitt plays Jack and George plays Miles? And that caused the biggest dilemma they ever faced in making that movie, because you get 2 huge movie stars, you can get the budget you want, because they were fighting to get a budget that was more than anybody wanted to put up for the kind of actors he wanted in it, which were character actors. He wanted Paul Giamatti and Thomas Hayden Church. After months of auditioning, these are the actors he wanted. He just saw them as being the right actors. It just so happens they're kind of Mutt and Jeff kind of. They look different, you know. One's very tall and rangy, and one's a kind of a pudgy guy. And, you know, he liked that. And here he was being offered the biggest movie stars in the world. In fact, they have a movie out right now called Wolves.
Yeah.
And it was terrible, by the way.
Yeah,
Well, you know.
it's mediocre at best. I'll say
Not
that.
one of my favorites.
Well, I enjoyed it, but I know what you mean.
I just can't imagine Clooney
It's a different movie.
playing Miles, depressed.
Yeah.
These guys don't. Depression is not what they present when they
No,
look at the camera.
Well,
I mean,
I've seen Clooney act. I've seen him do kind of oddball films where
Yeah.
he's very brows are furrowed, and he's not
yeah.
George
And
Clooney.
Clooney, yeah, right.
They're both very good actors, by the way. They're not just movie stars; they're actually actors, and they
No,
can't.
I like both their movies. I do.
But I wouldn't want to. I don't want Sideways with those guys any more than I want to see Ronald Reagan playing the Humphrey Bogart role in Casablanca, which Warner Brothers once was tempted to do.
Oh my gosh.
But at the end of the day, you can't really argue the casting decisions, right? Because they
Yes.
were a big part of the success of the movie. They were fit those characters perfectly.
And all of the careers just took off after
Yeah.
this. I mean, they were all working actors. They were in,
Yeah.
but after this, like Virginia Madsen said, she said, I never had to audition after this film.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti was in an oddball. I remember seeing it. It was about a what was the name of the movie? About a cartoon.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was a movie before.
comic books,
That
yeah.
was the movie that came out the year before. It was a big hit at Sundance. In fact, it won Sundance Film Festival, called American Splendor.
Right. Odd movie.
Yeah,
It
well,
was
he was
good,
he
you
was
know?
playing Harvey Pekar, who was this very strange fellow that didn't look a bit like him. So it was a strange film in that there was a documentary part of it where they were talking to the real guy, and then
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti was playing him. But he caught the mood of that guy. He caught the attitude of the guy. He's such a good actor. In fact, Alexander Payne's told us he thinks he's the best actor in the
He
world.
really
So
is. And he was great in his current film, Holdovers.
Yes,
That movie
that was good.
is the Miles character, or
Yes.
Paul Giamatti playing Miles
Yes.
a bit. It's
Years
not
later.
exactly the same, but he's still, that movie was very, very good. Very, very
It
good.
was.
The first
Yeah, you can
movie
see
the first movie that he made it in was Private Parts with Howard Stern.
Right, that's true. He's a manager, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
pig vomit. He's always pig vomit to me. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about how the script went to
Sure.
Alexander Payne, and then
Well,
kind of give us some background on that.
Oh, the book. Well, the book was selected by Alexander Payne, and he has a writing partner named Jim Taylor. They met at UCLA grad school and became roommates and started writing together. They were doing and had written all their films together up to that point. The Descendants was his first film, I think, that Alexander wrote by himself, although there's other credits on it because there had been previous scripts for it. But these two guys batted out the film they wanted to write. They kept the novel open, and they were using a lot of the novel, which is unusual for them. Usually they kind of read the novel and throw it away and just write the movie they want with the novel in their head. In this case, they kept the novel open and used a lot of the scenes and situations, and even maybe some of the dialogue, and they came up with a script, and they did it all on spec, which means on speculation, which is Hollywood for you don't want to ever do this, but he was willing to do it because what he wanted to do is he wanted to get that script, cast it, then go to the various independent, the studios that had independent divisions. In other words, they had divisions within the studios that made independent films in those days. Doesn't happen much anymore. And say, okay, here's the script, here are the actors, this is the budget we want, in or out. And don't move it too much.
Yeah, there you go.
He got one. Well, I don't know if what we would have done if Fox Searchlight, as it was then called, hadn't bid on it. But they said, we will give you what you want, which was more money than he actually spent, $17 million. He actually spent just a little over 15.3, he says. So he came in under budget, on time, with the cast he wanted. Nothing went wrong in terms of the shoot. He said, when we needed sun, there was sun. When we needed shade, there was shade. It was just one of those things where the miraculous shoot, everything went perfectly, smoothly. The cast all got along. No signs behind the scenes drama, except for one thing, which I'll talk about in a minute. And they expected maybe modest returns, open in 4 theaters in October, roll out, maybe get some Oscar nominations, maybe some Spirit Awards, which is the awards for independent films, and maybe make $30 million. Well, you know what happened. They end up they were in 1,400 theaters when the Oscars were not announced. 1,400 theaters. It made over $70 million domestically. Overseas, millions of dollars overseas, and comedies don't tend to travel very well. This one did, especially to Europe, where wine is appreciated. And it was the biggest success of their career in terms of expectations versus results. So it was a success they're still trying to figure out. The one thing that almost went wrong was Frank Ostini, who we just mentioned. This film made him very wealthy. He was the man who was most adamantly opposed to making the film up there. He got a hold of the script. He felt it celebrated alcoholism, and he felt that was a bad optic for the wine industry in Santa Barbara. He's not a man who can read a screenplay the way maybe, other people can, because that's not his business. So he nearly shut the thing down by just making sure that most of vintners in the Santa Barbara Vintners Association wouldn't cooperate, and tried to get restaurants and hotels not to cooperate. It's hard to know how far he would have taken that. But in fact, Alexander and the producer of the film, Michael London, and even Rex Pickett, the writer of the novel, tried to talk him down from his tree and say, Frank, it's not about what a bunch of yahoos we are up here and how we're all drunks. It's all about these guys who have real serious problems with fidelity, with alcohol, and it's about that. And Alexander even told him, look, my brother died of an overdose, so I'm aware of what addiction can do. I'm not making fun of addiction, but I'm treating it in a comic way because that's the best way into this subject matter than treating it dramatically. The best way is to make it funny to the point it hurts. And it is. It's sometimes fun. It can be so funny it hurts. And that's what he did. And Frank said, okay. And it was just, well, it was 360-degree turnaround. Said, okay. And he let them use his restaurant, and of course, the rest is history.
Well, the restaurant was so much a part of, like, it was like the fifth character, the restaurant, and then of course the Pinot Noir, became these elements became part of the characters of the family. I call it the family of Sideways. All the actors, and how I think one of the reasons the film resonated with the audience worldwide. And there were people who've seen it, we've heard 100 times, 50 times. It's amazing. Is that the audience, they saw the family as like there was camaraderie, like they could be a part of that scene that was going on with each scene. So it just created a wonderful symbiosis of all the people acting, the actors. They were all living in a big house there, so they had a wonderful camaraderie going between them, and that resonated with the audience.
So Top Gun 2 just recently came out after decades. Tomorrow, Gladiator 2 comes out after decades. Is there a Sideways 2 coming out?
I hope not. Well, none of the people involved want it to happen. So it would have to be a whole different. By the way, in Japan, there was a remake of it in Japanese. Yeah, they did Sideways in Japan. But no, that was. I think they kicked around the idea. Nobody really wanted to do it because they felt they ended the movie perfectly, and they just, where do you go from that? And if you remember the end, Paul Giamatti's character goes to see Virginia Madsen's character and knocks on the door, and we fade to black, and we don't know what happens, and we don't want to know what happens. It's up to you, the audience, what happens.
There's no story. There's no story beyond that, really.
No. And I think Alexander Payne reminds me very much of Sidney Pollack, another friend of mine, who said, I don't trust happy endings. I don't like to see happy endings. I want there to be kind of a resolution of the plot line, but I don't want it. I like to leave things a little open-ended and not. And he gave a perfect example. He made Tootsie, the only comedy he ever made. And if you remember, Dustin Hoffman is pretending to be a woman, and he's acting in a soap opera with Jessica Lange's character, and he's falling in love with her, even though he's dressed up as this older woman. And then when all is revealed and his deception is revealed, there's a great falling out. She wants nothing to do with him, and he goes to make up with her father first because her father had his eye on him as a woman. And says, the only reason you're still alive is I never kissed you. Then he goes to see Jessica Lange, and there's this scene that ends the movie where they have a talk, a very kind of tense, nervous talk. And then she says something like, you remember that dress you had, the pink one? And said, could I borrow it sometime? And that he felt was a perfect ending because it says, okay, a connection is going to continue between these two. We don't know where it's going, probably nowhere, but anything's possible. Yeah. And that's where Sideways ends. A connection is going to continue. He's knocking on the door. She'll answer the door. Who knows what'll happen? That's up to you as the audience. You don't want the happy ending because some filmmakers really don't trust happy endings because we always know nobody lives happily ever after. So why have a happy ending? To be realistic, just have an ending where it ends it at a good point.
And that was a good point.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Hope, you know, there
Maybe
is
you should take some time here to tell everybody what they can expect out of the book. We're here to talk about your book, so maybe you
Our
can give a little bit. Yeah.
what can they expect, huh?
Well, I've gone most of the way through it, but and then after that, maybe you can share a couple anecdotes of something you've learned that was shocking or surprising or funny about
So,
the making of the movie. That would be interesting too.
so here's the thing, you know, we're talking to Pastor Rogel's wine fanatics. You've got a great group. So when we've been doing book signings, we've done a lot now, you know, all through Central Coast and Napa. And you'd be surprised how many sideways fanatics we've met. It's amazing. It's amazing. There's one guy who's got a whole YouTube channel on tracing every street that these people took in that Santa Ynez area.
Well, the
He's tracing
locations of the
the
film.
locations, you know. Yeah. And he's still missing one location because he's gone there. I said, why don't you just look on GPS? He said, no, that would be cheating. I'm going to personally go and take a look. I heard somebody who said, I've seen it 100 times. 100 times. Okay, over 20 years, it makes sense. So that there's just legions, like you have legions of wine fanatics, you know.
Well, our book, to try and
Yes.
answer the question, there's two stories going on the whole time. The one is why Pinot Noir and why Santa Barbara. So that's the wine side. Then why did this film get made? And that's Alexander Payne's side and Jim Taylor's side. So, and then they merge because after the movie came out, suddenly Pinot Noir and Santa Barbara were the center of the wine universe for a couple of years. And that has helped exponentially grow that area and grow Pinot Noir. And I think Pinot Noir has almost become too successful for its own good because it's being, like Merlot was, being planted in places it probably shouldn't be planted. And now you can drink some pretty mediocre $20
Right.
Pinots, just like Merlot was selling in those days. $10 Merlots were pretty bad. Thus the joke in the movie about I'm not going to drink any effing Merlot. And so our book is trying to talk about how, for the one time in the history of cinema, a film had a serious impact on another business. I can't think of any other film that did anything more than a momentary, like the old story was that when Clark Gable takes off his shirt and it happened one night and shows that he has no undershirt, which all American men used to wear, it hurt the undergarment industry. Well, okay, a little bit, and maybe for a while. And most people think underwear was going out of, the undergarments were going out of style anyway. But that's a pretty minor blip. This was a huge impact that we're still feeling today. I think the taste rooms you go into, the prices you get, the price per bottle. I mean, it's all because of this movie. Thomas Hayden Church told us when we met him at the screening in Westwood last month, where it was this month actually, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That he's in Texas wine country now, and when he goes there, everybody says we wouldn't have an industry here in Texas if it weren't sideways. That's what got the industry going here in Texas. So this is a tremendous impact.
Did Bottle Shock have any real impact that you know of?
Not that I know of. It was the only other wine movie I can think of, and maybe people saw it and started, I don't know, drinking Chateau Montelena. I don't know, but I don't think that was a very successful film in terms of huge box office the way Sideways was. So what impact could it have with a very small sampling size?
But you know, the movie wasn't made or the book wasn't written that, it's going to impact a particular wine. It just, again, it just grew organically. People connected. The viewers definitely connected. And they connected to the fact that how going into wine tasting room, how tasting wines became a little bit more user-friendly, completely changed the landscape, the culture of tasting wines, going to tasting rooms. It just became a little bit more friendly, and people could relate to that.
When Mile is describing Pinot, that's the sales pitch.
Yes.
There, right?
Yeah.
It's beautifully written.
Richard
And-
Sanford, who is probably the guy who started Pinot Noir in Santa Barbara, and when he made his 1975 Pinot Noir, and it was considered as good as a Burgundian one.
Yeah.
He said that speech gave him chills down his back. He just said, I couldn't believe it. It was like the most perfect speech I've ever heard,
Yeah.
the most perfect expression of what it is about Pinot Noir that I love and that many of us Burgundian hounds like.
Yeah.
You know,
That was just like a perfect.
Did that come from the book? Or
No.
From
No.
It came from a script.
that came from Alexander Payne and and the subsequent speech by Virginia Madsen about how she views wines.
That was beautiful too.
Alexander Payne is very savvy about wine. He doesn't talk about it too much, but he just likes wine, and he happens to know something about it. And that was him writing from his heart about how he felt about wine, especially Virginia's speech. The Pinot speech, you can't find it in the novel, but if you think about what Rex Pick says in the novel, it's kind of there. There's not a speech, but the way he talks about Pinot, the way the adulation he has for Pinot is there in the book for sure. I think what Alexander Payne did, and he says this was a scene he kind of wrote himself, was distill that into one, 30, 40 second, whatever it is, speech. And it also subtextually talks about his main character, Miles, because he's kind of talking about himself when he talks about thin skin. It can't live anywhere. It has to be gently nurtured and all this, which is very true about Pinot. He's kind of talking about his own ego and the fragility of it. So everybody has seen that double layer of meaning.
Yeah.
It's there. And I don't think you could have used another grape and done that.
Well, speaking of other grapes, like Pinot obviously was the star, but we also know Syrah is a predominant grape in the area that does extremely well. Did it have any impact, residual or any other?
Well, not from the movie, because the
No.
movie doesn't talk about Syrah. Although interestingly, when they're having that speeches we just talked about, what we're drinking? You remember what they were drinking? Andrew Murray Syrah.
Yeah, they were drinking.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
They opened the bottle, in the kitchen. And
I said earlier, they don't drink as much Pinot as you think they do, because, when they meet Sandra, they're drinking some and discussing Cabernet Franc.
Cabernet Franc, yes.
I mean, it's interesting that all the way through they're drinking all kinds of things. They're drinking.
But they don't show a Pinot. But they do show Pinot bottles when they're having dinner at the Los Olivos Cafe. So all the bottles keep coming. There's Burgundies, there's Kistler, there's Sonoma. So you see Pinots coming at that dinner, like a whole wave of different Pinots.
When he's sitting at the bar at the hitching post, so he's drinking drinking the hitching post label.
There he's drinking, because that's what hitching post is known for, the liner. So so they show drinking Pinot, but they don't say, he just says, give me Highliner. He doesn't say, give me Pinot Noir.
But it was established that is Pinot Noir,
yeah.
So what's your favorite scene in the movie?
Actually, we would like your viewers, your listeners to tell us, because we asked that from many of our friends who come to book
Running down the street naked.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so that's my scene. There you go. And having said that scene, as we were given selections of photos to choose for the book, as you know, the book has tons of photos, and one of them was this naked man running down the street. And I wanted to put that in the book. I wanted to select that, and Kirk said no. He said,
"She likes to tell the story like I'm a prude. I just didn't think that people opening a book want to. That's the first thing they."
I said, "I want that."
I don't know.
I mentioned this to Alexander Payne. I said he wouldn't let me put that photo in the book. He says, "Why not?"
Yeah, well,
right. That's the most iconic part of the movie.
I know that, and the bucket.
Yeah,
the bucket.
Right.
The bucket is a GIF. So you can tell how iconic it is now, right?
Yes, yes.
Let me, Patrick and Laura, you got a question? Unmute. Patrick. Pay attention. No. You have a question, but you have to unmute.
I can answer that question.
Oh, Drops of God.
My button here.
Drops of God has season 2 about to come out.
Yeah.
Oh, Drops of God has a season 2 coming out? That's cool.
Yeah, it does.
So
Yeah.
you earlier you were talking about all of the influences and anything, and one of the things that I found fascinating was Drops of God. And I had a lot of non-wine people go, "Oh my God, that was an amazing movie. I
Yes.
learned all this other things." And I
Yeah.
guess my question is that still too new to actually have an influence on the wine industry? It's a different twist on it because of the series and the politics and the crazy high-end stupidity of it. But it's kind of cool, and people actually get into how it moves you emotionally when you're having these wines and actually ties in the experience of life.
Well,
with
have you
wine.
found anybody quoting that movie? I mean, talking about that movie when
You know,
In the
That's-
Psalm circle, yes. In the Psalm circle, they do talk about it between the Psalms and the high end, and that's very limited. That
you know what
audience-
I've heard about the residual conversation I heard, because I love that show, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
But the way it netted out to me was that it was more a critique of critics, more so than sommelier skills. It
But-
kind of felt like
Right.
it netted out about that.
But one of the things that I found is one of the guys I work with, he's head of the AI for the company that I work for. And he is a beer guy. He is a massive beer guy. I get along with him great. I love my beer too. I am non-denominational. So it works out perfect. But I actually started drinking more wine because of this, because
Oh,
I
really?
found out how it actually ties. And his wife, who actually heads up, she's an MD, PhD, was also a beer person. And she goes, I'm drinking more wine because of it. And they got fascinated by it and went around with it. And I found a couple other people doing the same thing that are not big wine people.
I
Yeah.
still question how many thousands of people are actually watching it versus the millions of people who were watching a movie in 2004.
Well, I'm curious. I don't know. But
Well, you
it's-
have to have Apple Plus.
Right.
You have to have Apple TV to watch it, and not
Right.
everybody does. So
Yeah, streaming
obviously, you don't have
And
those.
then it has to come on your suggestions.
Yeah.
Right, right.
But
right.
Patrick, I think it's a great question. I mean, I thought it was everybody I know that watched the series loved it.
I
My take on it is it's very Psalm level
Yes.
experience, which it's beautifully written, but it's deep. It's a deep dive into wine.
Yeah.
And
But you see, everybody who loved it, who watched it, are people who seek wine-related films. You go streaming, you go Netflix, say which is wine-related, but that's a different audience. But if something like Sideways,
Hold on.
it was for the masses.
That's true. It's more
You know,
broad appeal.
theaters, 1,700, how many theaters? Masses, So when you talk about streaming, there's a very limited audience, and we seek out what we want.
Also, I think the Psalm movies would be the same category as
Right.
Drops of God.
Yeah, the Psalm movies were very esoteric, and the fact
Especially
is,
the
I
first
love
two.
watching.
Yeah.
Sorry?
yeah.
The Psalm movies have now become movies about wine, but the first two were really about the guys
The guys.
who were
Right. They follow the person. They follow the person and all their up and downs.
personalities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that was they're very good. I just don't know what impact they would have on wine drinking in America.
Right.
It makes me not want to be a Psalm. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
Well, true.
It's
I mean, I think it has the exact opposite. It's so inclusive and everything else like this. But the Drops of God was this interesting thing that actually I've had a lot of people mention before to me. So
Best wine is a very geeky kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And what Sideways did was just the opposite. You had two
Yeah.
characters,
Yeah.
one who's a wine snob and the other who knows nothing about it. So one is teaching the other all the way through how to sniff, taste, wine and the whole rigmarole. And people were saying, oh, that's accessible and it pairs well with the romance. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try that.
See, it
I don't think the kind of thing where you're trying to, do all this stuff that you to get a master of sommelier. I don't know if that would.
First of all, Kirk, it's a series that takes hours to watch.
Well, that's
Yes.
another
You
thing.
you can't do that in a commercial theater format.
Right.
What is Sideways? An hour and 30 minutes, or
2 hours.
It's 2
Oh,
hours.
yeah.
Well, I hope that makes your audience realize we need to go back to the theaters again. I like streaming. I love streaming, but
Yeah.
I still think I want to see certain movies. I want to see them in the movie houses, and I'm
I'm
very
going
frustrated.
tomorrow night, Kirk. I'm going to go watch Gladiator 2 tomorrow night.
Okay, but I'm very frustrated about
Yeah.
something. Clint Eastwood has a new movie out. Do you even know that?
No.
No.
You can't find it anywhere. Warner Brothers dumped it. They just dumped it. You can't find it in San Luis Obispo County. I checked. I can't find it
I bet you
anywhere.
it's gone straight to
It's called
streaming.
Juror 2 or 2. Well, not yet. It'll be on Max because that Warner Brothers owns it, and I don't get Max. So how do I see it? I can't even see it. And that's the studio stupidity and the idiots running the studios today. They're idiots.
Is that a result of the early testing they do on it? They don't think it will have mass appeal?
Oh, they don't even test it. It's just, don't get me started on what lunatics run the studios.
Okay, we'll schedule a call number 2.
They
for
bought,
that.
they bought into this streaming thing, and
Forget about his,
any money
forget
on
about
it.
forget
And the
about his
shareholder
star
value
power.
Yeah.
His star power is not as great as his directorial power.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Exactly.
hey, we never finished the question about everybody's favorite scene in
Yeah,
the
let's
movie.
ask everybody.
Oh yeah, well, let's ask people. Ask your
Yeah.
Patrick, your favorite
You?
scene?
Actually, when he was talking about why he likes wine,
Okay.
and that there's this one scene where he's talking about it. Why do you like it? Why do you want it? I'm trying to remember. I haven't seen the movie in about 3 or 4 years, so I'm trying to remember this. But I remember him sitting in this chair.
Oh yeah, the
And he's
people
kind of going back, and he says, like, why do you do this? What is your passion about it? And he
It was-
talks about it, and it actually spoke a lot to me at that point.
Very romantically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve Perlman, you got a scene?
Unfortunately, it's been too long since I watched it. This has made me think I got to go back and watch it.
Okay.
But Drops of God is also great.
Yeah.
You can stream it on Hulu, and then it may be popping up here and there or other places. And
Yeah.
they're doing a lot of screenings of it in movie theaters, but I
Oh, they
can't
are.
point you to one right now.
But if
I
you
actually have a DVD copy that I watched last week.
yeah,
Wow.
one
And I still have around, yeah.
classic.
Joe, Laura, favorite scene?
I think it's for me, it's early on when they're first tasting very early in the movie, and he's trying to describe the wine to Thomas Hayden Church. And Thomas Hayden Church trying to take it in, and then he stops and he goes, "Are you chewing gum right now?"
Yeah, right. That is very funny. That is very funny. Yeah.
So I think mine is just about towards the end where he's in the burger joint. He's having that really good wine out of a paper cup, because so many times we say, that's not a Tuesday night wine. That's not a Wednesday night wine. I'm all, no, take the good wine and drink it as a normal everyday wine. Enjoy your wine. And so that's one of my favorites.
I actually paid attention to that. That was a styrofoam cup.
Yep.
It was
I mean, you can get a little swirl going, but not much. But that's my favorite, because take the good wines and drink them whenever.
Right.
So.
That was a 62 Cheval Blanc. Is what's
61 Cheval Blanc, and Alexander Payne put that wine in the movie deliberately, because what is in Cheval Blanc? What is the grape in there? It's Merlot.
And Cab Franc.
It's mostly Merlot. He did that deliberately.
It's right.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah.
He did that deliberately. He said, I want to realize that
Norm had the answer.
Merlot. He just doesn't like the kind of Merlot they were making in California in those days.
Yeah. Laura, you got a question or story?
I was just gonna say, one of the only few good things about COVID was when we had access to winemakers with those online Zoom tastings. And I did one with Duckhorn, and the winemaker was talking about the effect of that comment about Merlot on the Merlot industry. And other wineries were selling off their Merlot vineyards, and Duckhorn just picked them up. And they amassed a whole bunch. And then they have one Merlot called Three Palms Vineyard.
Yes.
It's very sturdy. And
Number one wine in the world, like 3 or 4 years ago, right?
I poured some, and she's talking, and she's talking about how people come into their winery and they say, "I'm not drinking any effing Merlot." So she will go behind the bar and pour that Three Palms Vineyard in a glass and give it to them. And they're like, "That's what I'm talking about. A nice, bold cab." And then she puts the bottle down. And literally, she was telling us this. I looked at the bottle because I'd just taken a sip, and I thought I had the wrong glass. because it's like strong. It's very bold, like a cab. And it was just so funny that how I had that same impression, but they were able to acquire, she said, some really quality vineyards because others took the decision to make a momentary judgment and let all those vineyards go. So
That's a fascinating story. That's a great story. And I
Well,
think that Three Palms was,
their
I don't know if
flagship.
it was Wine Enthusiast, but it was their #1 wine in the world a few years ago, three,
Yes,
4 years
yes.
ago. Yeah.
But you see, the Merlots, like what you're talking about, Duckhorn in Napa, Trefethen, Paulmeyer, and there's another one in M. There's so many really, really good Merlots. So this is what Duckhorn did 2016, I think, but 2016 or 2017. They started a whole #me Merlot Me month in October, because November 7th is Merlot Day. And so they started a whole promotion and got all the Merlot producers in California, in Washington State, and internationally to promote. And it was like a #Merlot Me month me movement in October. And I would do Merlot tastings here. We would do it first. We did it at our homes, from Washington, from Central Coast, and from Napa and Sonoma. And then we started doing it different tasting rooms in Paso. I didn't get to do it this year because we were so busy with the book promotion and all that. But they really started the whole Merlot movement, and they started going, and suddenly good Merlot started coming up in the last 8-9 years.
Yes,
There's some,
Merlot still has a
Paso has some Merlot coming, right? I think I had in my inventory, Adelaide had a Merlot, and maybe I'm wrong. And they're starting to pop up.
And we found some really good Merlots here, small producers like Arndt Cellars, Don Arndt,
Don
and-
Arndt, right? Okay.
Yeah, and Don Brady of Robert Hall, he makes his own little Brady.
that Merlot is fabulous.
That Merlot is fantastic, So we discovered by doing these tastings in October, we discovered great Merlots in Paso. Amazing.
So I'm going to tell you my favorite scene.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I like Jason's scene too. That one's a good one. This is from an acting point of view. The lady, they're at the hitching post. The ladies get up to go to the bathroom, and Thomas Hayden Church just pulls off the chipped face real quick and goes, "Miles," and he probably said, "Drop the F-bomb" or something. Did you drunk dial? You're drunk dialing, right? And it was a hilarious scene because they could pull it off because the two of them were working so well together. It's just really funny.
Yeah,
drinking and dialing.
Drinking, dialing.
Yeah, there were the drink and dial.
Yeah. That was funny.
That's a key sequence because, as Sandra O pointed out to us when we had our interview with her, she said the 3 people in that scene are having a nice dinner. One person in that scene is having a meltdown because he just learned that day that his ex-wife got remarried.
Right.
And he has just gone to the dark side. And so you have the 2 things going on. You have the kind of the guys and girls getting flirting with each other and all that kind of, and all the nice wines and the like food.
Jack's on the prowl.
Having a meltdown, and it's a very complicated scene for an actor to pull off, and that's Paul Giamatti's genius that he could pull that off. And I think that scene, along with the porch scene, is what probably got him so many acting accolades from critics and from the Spirit Awards and all those other places, because that's a tough scene where you have to have one guy is having all these issues, and that, the viewer, but 3 other people are 2 are oblivious to it, and one is kind of telling him to calm down, easy boy. So it's a great scene that you referenced.
Which we learned from, speaking of wines, we learned from Alexander that all the wines that they're drinking throughout the movie are actual wines. They're not prop wines. Because
they started with prop wines and they got so sick of
the color was
because they had to use juice and they had to use dye and they had to use all kinds of ingredients and it was undrinkable.
And the color wasn't right.
And they were getting sick.
Yeah.
Well, the color was good, but it didn't appeal to them. And you have a lot of drinking in this movie. So they finally started drinking the real wine when they could get away with it. you
Yeah.
know. And
That's
so
actually
Paul
that's actually
Giamatti said, sorry.
no, it's actually a very fascinating problem because it's like, okay, I can either get sick from that or I can get drunk from it. And it's
Yes.
just like, how do you, and sometimes the drunkard actually helps the acting. And it's like you lose all your inhibitions and you get into form and you go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard this from
Well,
other actors and stuff. Like, I'm not an actor by any stretch, but anyway, I find that fascinating. It's just like, wow, they're really drinking real wine. Oh, that's kind of cool.
they did in this movie, and it's a no-no with actors. They don't do that. Believe me, you see a movie and they're drinking, they're not drinking real wine.
Yeah.
Right.
In this case, they finally did it because Alexander Payne was such a stickler for authenticity. He wanted a Syrah to look like a Syrah. He didn't want to look like high C juice or something, or whatever they call it. And what the prop masters were coming up with was something that looked authentic, but was so awful.
Awful
It was
looking.
gagging them. And they just said, well, try and drink some real wine, to the point that the scene you talked about in that diner, Paul Giamatti, it was shot over 2 nights, maybe 3, I think 2. He was pretty soused by the end of it. He didn't drink a lot of wine.
And he's not into wine.
He doesn't drink wine at all.
Totally,
He and Thomas Hayden Church do not like wine. No.
they'll have cocktails, I suppose, or beer.
That is funny.
Yeah.
You know,
It's actually funny because I was just real quickly looking up, and it's just like, we have a fairly large cellar, and I go ahead and I pull up on how much Merlot we have. We have 14 bottles of Merlot. And I was kind of amazed, and it's like, okay, is that because of the sideways influence, or is it because of our palates, or because of what? I'm actually, I didn't realize we had that little.
Patrick, what would the number of cabs be?
Oh God.
Oh,
Hang on here, I can find out.
not as, you know what? Syrahs and red blends are starting to eclipse our cabs.
Well, a lot of red blends have Merlot in them.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. That too. Yes.
Are they mostly all from Paso?
No.
No, just
No,
all
no,
Right.
our Merlots, no, our Merlots I mean,
from Napa?
Livermore, Napa, Santa Cruz Mountains, Paso.
Oh.
Yeah.
So Markham in Napa, MARKHAM.
Oh, that's the one.
Yeah.
Amazing. And they're one of the oldest wineries. Prices are such a throwback. You wouldn't believe it. Yeah.
I haven't had any of theirs in a long time.
We have 134 cabs.
Wow. See, what I find fascinating about that is I've done numerous blind tastings where people get cab and Merlot so mixed up, and yet typically we go so much heavier in cab. To your point.
Yeah.
Well, a good Merlot, let's say that Petrus is 100% Merlot, and that's probably the most expensive bottle in the world. And we've had one. We've opened a 1975 Petrus once. Is one of the best wines you'll ever taste, certainly the best wine I ever tasted. So Merlot has the capability of being every bit as good as a cab. It's just, I still don't think California winemakers have grappled with it. Some have, Duckhorn, for instance, and the 3 Palm.
Yeah, 3 Palm vineyards.
I just don't think it's at the, Christian Moix did an interview with Wine Spectator last month where he just said, I'm sorry, I don't drink California Merlot. I just don't. He's a French winemaker. His family he's behind Dominus. His French family is behind Petrus. He didn't say anything against it. He just says, I don't drink it.
But that's, that's personal taste.
Right.
That's personal taste.
It's okay, And so
I don't know if I said this to everybody before we went on the air, but the book, if you go into the book, every chapter there's a pre-chapter, not a pre-chapter, but a chapter about a region and some of the most notable Pinots, correct?
Yes.
Our friends here, the Tinkers, I think they know a lot about Willamette, which is in there too.
Yes, well, we did. We included 8 of California AVAs. So starting with Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, Santa Rita, then we had Slow Coast, Santa Lucia Highlands.
So you went to all these regions?
Yes.
Yeah,
We've been going all these years anyway, but then we revisited them and
Yeah.
tasted some of their samples there, their wines there, and some that I tasted before in Sonoma and Russian River, Sonoma Coast. We didn't get a chance to go there, but we included them because I'd already tasted them. So we had Sonoma Coast, Russian River, then Anderson Valley, Small little valley, but just brilliant Pinots there.
Mendocino. That's Mendocino County.
In Mendocino.
Then Oregon, Willamette,
Yeah.
as you said.
Then Willamette Valley in Oregon. So that's
Burgundy. I think the only thing we missed was Germany. Germany
Yeah.
is a big Pinot
is
wine
Pinot,
producer,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we didn't include that. I'm not sure why. We just didn't.
Well, it's people don't know much about German wines, and then we also had space limitation. You can only add so much, in the book. So and then we had New Zealand, even though we haven't been there, we know New Zealand wines, and then we had Rex Pickett, some of his choices selection that we put him in, and the Burgundy over the years that we've visited Burgundy, some of the wines we tasted then. Like Domaine de Romani Conti and others. So we've included a list, curated a list of Pinots from all these regions. So each chapter ends with that AVA and the list of those Pinots.
By the way, we're drinking some
Yeah.
Pinots here that are from Paso Robles, a place you don't normally associate with
So
Pinot
we have-
Noir, but I think we should give them a little shout out.
Ascension Ridge, and you want to pick up. So these
This
two
is
wines.
Windward, which is Mark Goldberg's label. He has sold the winery now, and
moved here.
he is going to, Philip Crummell, who has Ascension Ridge, is going to continue the brand name and continue making wines that say Windward on the label, but it'll be Ascension Ridge.
So these two wines will be served at our book signing on this Saturday, from 2 to 5 in Paso Robles at the Firefly Gallery. It's in downtown.
So come see us.
Come see us if you're in Paso, or
What other places are you going to?
other places. Tomorrow, Friday, we're going to be in Santa Barbara at the Au Bon Clément tasting room in downtown on Anacapa Street.
Gary Eberly insinuated that you were going to be over there.
So we will be at Eberly the Friday of Thanksgiving weekend, which is 29th, from 12 to 3.
Are you
Gary
doing,
Eberly is a
are you
big
doing
fan
a book?
of
Are you
wine,
doing
but
a book
makes-
signing?
Book signing. So
Yeah.
all these places, books will be available. Book signing will be done. And then in Paso area, we're doing, at Allegretto Hotel Resort, we're doing, with their wines, Allegretto wines, on the 30th from 3 to 6. So if anybody's here Thanksgiving weekend, we're at Everly on 29th, and 30th we are at Allegretto.
In Allegretto, I'll be drinking the Tannat because I love their Tannat.
Their Tannat's beautiful. A shout out to their Tannat.
The Allegretto label tonight. You love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like a lot of their wines.
Yes.
I shouldn't even single out
And-
anything
and the
because I
white-
think their wines are superb.
And their white blend is really great. The white blend is good. Then we're in Napa Sonoma mid-December at Buena Vista on Friday the 13th.
Oh.
And Raymond on Saturday the 14th. Jean-Charles Boisset is a dear friend for many years, and he's in our book, and so he's offered to host book signing for us on those 2 days.
And because we're running short on time, I mean, thank you so much we've gone.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We said we'll keep it to an hour, but obviously you graciously have extended. Where do everybody gets your book?
On Amazon, that's the easiest way to get. But if you have a Barnes and Noble in your neighborhood,
Check with them.
Check with them.
Books don't go to bookstores too much anymore. They
Yeah.
stay in warehouses and people
they-
order them online, which is fine, except I walked in a bookstore just to see what's going on in the book world, and I like to see what the titles are. And first book I ever had, I walked in a Barnes and Noble, and they're always right in the front of the store. And
Yeah.
now the local San Luis Obispo one isn't even carrying it right now.
So check with Barnes and Noble, and if you're in the LA area, Book Soup has it. Book Soup and Vromans.
Do you have an audio version?
Not that I know of. We'll have Paul Giamatti narrate it. How's that?
Yeah, that would be cool. Actually, we
I'm
should
sorry,
ask
who are you going to have narrate it?
Paul Giamatti. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I thought maybe you were going to get George Clooney
don't
to
have-
do it.
Contractual obligation
No,
with him.
It might
whatsoever.
cost you.
There's a book.
I can't read books very well, and I think she would probably be able to do it pretty well, good job. I just don't have the voice for
Well,
it.
we'll see. To be,
And do I have to play all the characters? I don't know.
look, I mean, it's just launched 2 weeks ago, so.
No,
and
that's the new chic way of presenting your book, and It does have a purpose. I mean, there's three things you can do when you're on a long drive: listen to a book, listen to a podcast, or listen to music. Right?
The problem with this book is if you're listening for a
I
long
might
drive.
try to watch a hockey game on my phone on the dashboard.
Oh,
but
yeah.
no,
You'd
I'm
be
just
tempted
kidding.
to pull up somewhere and have a glass of wine, but you really shouldn't if you're driving.
No, I cannot do that. Yeah,
So,
I don't do that. But
You don't want to ice the puck when you're driving. That's for
Yeah.
yeah.
You can
Anyway.
also talk with your wife when you're on a long trip.
I was gonna say, man,
I agree.
No,
Or
I
listen,
do this,
listen
but
to.
I
Listen
do
to.
this while she's on conference calls on the way. Yeah.
So
One comment real quick. I appreciate you guys are not barbarians. You're actually drinking Pinot out of an actual Pinot glass. I saw that.
well, this is, yeah, well, this
Well, you know what this is? This
a
is
Riedel.
Riedel, and
Riedel.
they originally made it for the Oregon wine industry.
Yes.
And they called it the Oregon Pinot, and California went, what? And so diplomatically, they changed
You
it
want
to
a glass?
a Pinot glass.
Yeah, and
But
I
see
love
this lip? It's this lip,
little, that
and it
helps.
directs the Pinot Noir direct to your top of your tongue, and
Yeah.
that's where you get the flavor. And it's a very specially designed for that lip there.
Just tiny
The
little.
lip, right.
Yeah, so it's not a bowl like most Pinot glasses are. It has slight tulip.
It looks like a Syrah.
Sometime I'd love to do that.
The last half inch, the
Yes,
Syrah.
yes. Then it
Now, their Chardonnay glass is quite different. It's like this, but there's no lip at all because
Right, that's right. It's drawn in.
Oh,
Right.
Riedel does a great
come on.
glass tasting where you're tasting ice water, but paying attention to where it places it in your mouth, the different glasses. And I would love to do that sometime.
Patrick, what glass was that? A Libby?
No, this is a Riedel. This is the Chardonnay. This
I'm
is
just
our
kidding.
Pinot glass.
Yeah, we have that.
I was just kidding you.
Yeah.
Well, that's perfect for Chardonnay, but
That's a
it
good-
doesn't work with Pinot. And then
Yeah.
we had, who was the Riedel guy that came here?
Mr. Riedel himself, I forget his
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
Maximilian something or other.
Maximilian, yeah.
Maximilian came and he demonstrated. He poured the wines into 3 different glasses. You drink it, and you
Oh,
there
yeah,
was
it
a
was a
huge difference.
Wonderful tasting with Riedel.
Then why do they label this one as for Pinot too?
That was
Yeah.
a Pinot glass. Yes, it does.
Yeah, so this one's different than this one. It's,
I think I saw those at Sizzler.
I'm sorry, it's hard to show it, but
Yeah.
I
No,
see.
Well, yeah, the top is different. Yeah.
yeah, it is, but it's not what you have. It doesn't go in as.
okay, we gotta go buy no wine glasses.
God.
Yeah.
Jason apologized. He had to drop off early, but he told me he and his wife went to a Riedel a thing in LA. He
Mhm.
said it was extraordinary, and so we hooked up. Oh, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and he goes, and he poured the same bottle of wine in two different glasses, and he goes, "Which one's better?" Well, I didn't know. I thought it was 2 different wines, and it was eye-opening.
Yeah. Oh, that's, you have to sit through the seminar. He's wonderful. That, yeah.
It
It's
is
an eye-opener.
amazing. And
It is.
I do recommend, especially for Pinot lovers out there, getting the Riedel Pinot glass because it does make a difference.
Yeah,
Although a really good Pinot will taste good in even a styrofoam cup, I
styrofoam
think.
cup.
But anyway,
I don't know.
well, that might be pushing it.
I
But you
suppose.
know, a good wine's a good wine, but it just that much better. Let's put it that way.
We do
Yeah.
appreciate you, Mike, for putting this together for us. I really, really appreciate it. And it's a
Thank you
first
so much.
you're
for
doing
joining
it.
us.
Yeah. No, it's thank you. I mean, we're not the winemakers, but we know the winemakers. We love them, and we love all the wines, California. So thank you.
We're going to continue to read your comments in the group. You're an active member.
Oh yeah. Oh please, yes, absolutely. And if you
Keep participating because your opinions are valued, and that's what people come to the group for, is to get some information.
I love this group, and you've done wonders. Really, we thank you. We appreciate.
I
what you-
really haven't done anything, so don't.
Well, getting people together is a job. It's quite a job.
I created the platform. Everybody else did the work.
You did a great job. Yeah.
But I appreciate your joining us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mike, and thank you, Jason, and thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Ah, that's
Let me-
right.
Stop it. Record. What
Don't do,
happened? Oh.
Oh, wait, just go off.
don't do anything until he does it.